if asked that question, who are you, 6 months ago, I would have talked about the things I'd done in the past. I was a workaholic. I worked not to feel. My orientation about my identity has moved to more of a future focus. But having an impossible goal is like a North Star. It keeps you going. The size of the obstacle is directly proportional to the size of the goal. Like, I watched things happen, miracles happen, when people were supporting each other.
Ben Owen is a world-class coach, a leader in the transformational space, and my friend. I am so thrilled for this upcoming conversation. We are going to talk about impossible goals, obstacles that you hit, what true transformation looks like, and so much more. Welcome to Possibilities with me, Hina. I'm a peak performance mindset coach, and I help you create a life you love through ease, joy, and fun. We don't do any of that hard struggle or grind over here. Ben, welcome to the show.
Oh, I'm so excited to be here.
I am so excited for the conversation that we're going to have because when you and I get together and we talk, we have the best conversations. In fact, I learn so much when I am spending time with you. So I'm really excited for this. And I also know that right now you are solo parenting in the desert to your two beautiful girls. So it's okay if they interrupt or anything happens, but I thought, why not tell a little bit about you personally?
Wow.
So you're married, 2
I
girls.
am, I am.
Where are you at in your life?
I absolutely, my lives and my lives, my 3 ladies. So I was really fortunate to get married last year to my absolute soulmate, Poppy. We got married in Santorini, beautiful wedding. And honestly, Hannah, since I've had these 2 little girls, my whatever ever inside me was strong and kind of, what's the word, solid, is now mush. I'm so I'm so soft. I cry a lot. Everything that I used to pride myself on, stiff upper lip it and all that sort of stuff. I'm very, very soft, and no, it's been beautiful. The biggest transformation I've ever had is becoming a father. It's been the best. Like, I think I've heard this said before. The best self development tools in your life are marriage and parenting, and they absolutely are. You've got to become a phenomenal teammate. You've got to become a great communicator, and I have become every bit of that since having the girls. And I think it's one of those things. It's an investment. The more that I spend time with these 2 little ladies, the better things get. And we got with the boys. One of my clients years ago said to me, and I never forget this. He said, "Ben, it's going to be like Christmas Day every day when you see your kids," and it does feel like that. I think you can probably attest to that as well, Hannah. And so, yeah, it's that's a little bit about me. I'm a passionate dad. I'm a passionate coach, and I've been doing this a long time. And yeah, I really enjoy what I do.
I think, that's why we work so well together. We've collaborated on things to before, on masterminds before, and I know that the clients always speak to our approach at a high level being similar, but the way that we talk about the information, the analogies we use, the examples we use, they are different. And so they get so much from us being together because it's such a rich experience. And I think that's a testament to who you are, Ben, as a dad too, because you bring your whole self to every coaching conversation. Every coaching conversation I've witnessed, you bring everything. And you talked about transformation, and that's what we're going to talk about today, and the transformation that happened for you when you became a father. You've been in the transformation space for well over a decade in different iterations. So when you think of transformation, what does that mean to you?
Oh, thank you so much. It was really interesting how I began my transformation journey. I'm gonna go back and tell you the story that the story that really made me realize that um, I needed to transform myself. And that's when I was 18 years old. I had my stepfather was passing away from cancer at the time. And I remember watching the impact of his cancer on my family. It was like it destroyed my family. It really tore us apart. It made it so my mum's life so difficult. I just remember just thinking to myself as an 18-year-old boy, transformation, like if I could have helped him transform his health, that ripple effect would have been so positive. And I think I made an unconscious commitment at that point. It's like, I'm going to go and find out what it means to be healthy and fit, and what are the best routes to get there. And I went and studied at university, did masters, all sorts of things, PGC, everything, all the badges to work out how to learn and teach transformative education in health. And what I noticed that, especially in the early parts of my fitness career, that people would come into a transformation environment or a program or a process, and some people would fail and some people would succeed. More people would fail than succeed. And I really wanted to know why. I really wanted to understand what was a true transformation. And there was actually, that's a really good question because I was actually talking to someone about this the other day. I think a true transformation is where you have fully let go on the handbrakes, the patterns, the things from the past that keep you in a certain identity or paradigm, that you're operating out of a new operating system, like entirely new. So, for example, say when you go to when your alarm clocks goes off in the morning, it's not I'm going to go downstairs and get a coffee and sit on the sofa and eat some breakfast. It's like I'm going to go to the gym. It's something entirely different. It can be also a transformation is when you fully let go of an identity that no longer serves you. And I'm going to get, I think we'll go quite a lot into this because it's something I really took from you early on. Because I think when we first started talking was when the pandemic hit. My gym was coming to a really hard part of its existence. And you came in and you shared about transformation with my clients, and that's how Hina and I first met. And I really started to believe that the best way to go about that wasn't through fitness. And that was that point during that last couple of years in the gym, is like, actually, the best levers that I can pull and help people use, like what I call small levers that make big changes, was through coaching and mindset and psychology versus physiology alone. And I've just been on this journey of just trying to work out what are the most effective ways to help people transform. And I think that going back to your question, and maybe ask you, Hannah, what do you believe true transformation is? Because I think that's I think um, I've heard you talk about it in so much depth before. I think you've got a good, or if not better, answer than me on this one.
Ben, I echo exactly what you say, that it's a complete shift in identity, which then translates into your thoughts, your feelings, and your actions. And often, what I'll say to clients, even, is that, okay, if there has been a transformation, what am I seeing? Like, if I am in a non-creepy way in your house in the morning, what am I seeing? And it's exactly what you described. I'm seeing you now go to the gym in the morning, or I'm seeing you now have a morning routine, which is different than what I would have been seeing with the version of you in the past. So you nailed it.
I do actually like this concept, and I heard it recently. Is like, don't introduce yourself as your past, introduce yourself as your
Yeah.
future. And I was actually quite conscious when you asked for my bio, and I was like, oh, actually, am I going to start talking about the past? And like, I'm actually not. I'm no longer my past. And it was really interesting. I was like really conflicted. I was like, I need to write about my credentials and all these things that I've done. And I was like, no, but I'm actually creating something in the future, and that's who I am now. So I think this is something that's really shifted for me probably over the last 6 months. Is my orientation about my identity has moved to more of a future focus, and I think that's something that's really shifted for me. I if asked that question, "Who are you?" 6 months ago, I would have talked about being a gym owner, building a business, all the things I've done in the past. However, recently I've really focused on who am I in the future? What am I doing right now to be that person in the future? And that's been really helpful. Like that's been a super helpful thing to do.
It makes all the difference because then it's like you've got something to expand into as well. I was doing a photo shoot, my last photo shoot, and Julianne, who was my stylist and was organizing everything, said, "Okay, Hannah, tell me about the kind of look you're going for, what kind of clothes, give me some ideas. You can share some images." And the beautiful thing is Julianne is a client of mine as well, so she gets this because I said, "I will not be doing that. What I'm going to do instead is I will share with you about my future self because that's who I want you to dress. So I'm not gonna be bringing my things that I have now because the pictures are a reflection of who I'm stepping into." And she was like, "Yeah, I do say that." So even for the bio, I get it.
Mm.
I get it. And this is what I want everybody to hear is that you get to do this. You get to create yourself. You're not bound by your history. You're not bound by what happened 5 minutes ago or what happened yesterday. You get to decide who you wanna be and how you wanna show up, and I think one of the things that can help because that can just feel a little, formalist, like, where would I start? I think one of the things that can help is setting goals, and you talk a lot about this, Ben, setting impossible goals. What is an impossible goal?
Yeah, I realized the same thing, and before I dive into the impossible goal, I think this is the statement is that until you make your future vivid, you'll default to the patterns of the past. And what that means is that your brain likes the path of least resistance. And what happens is that unless we create a vivid, I think this is like, we should probably call it a vivid impossible goal, not just something that's like vague and ambiguous. And because your brain doesn't naturally flow towards that, it will flow towards the path of least resistance. And that's your past because you've lived it. It's clear, it's obvious, you can see it. So what I'm really getting better at myself, like I must admit, like the integrity gap was huge probably about 2 or 3 years ago. I'd talk about impossible goals, yet mine weren't clear. They weren't clear. They weren't vivid. They weren't, I hadn't walked through them in my mind's eye enough. And an impossible goal is something that you cannot achieve in your current state. And so what often happens, and I think this is something that I've seen, if I was to look back over the people that transformed versus the people who didn't, and I'll use the gym for an example because the gym is a great arena because like we had so many people coming in and out of the gym every single day. We were servicing 300 people a week in a transformation. So that's like a large group of people. And what would separate someone who would come in and transform, but not just like lose a stone or like 7 kilos for North American people, um, or was it 14 pounds? Maybe that's who would like lose the weight, but not just lose the weight, but become a different person. It was the people that would come in and tell me something that was seemingly impossible for them at the time. Ben, I'm 6 stone overweight. I want to go and run a marathon. I need to run a marathon. This is what my goal is. And you could see that there's this in the current state. If they would have run a marathon, it would have destroyed their body or they would have failed. It would have been super, super difficult. And in becoming the person that could run the marathon, that's when they transformed internally and externally.
And what did you notice first happen in a situation like that? Did you notice a shift in their physique or in the way that they were speaking, how they were showing up, and energy?
I did a yeah, 100%. It was it was a moment. They all had that moment,
Mm,
Harajaku moment. It's been referred to in the past, but if you've ever, it's also the F it moment. I don't know if I can swear, so I'm just going to keep it nice and clean. So
yeah, go
ladies
ahead.
might be listening to this, or gents in the car with kids. So it's kind of that moment where you're like, oh my god, I just cannot do this anymore. And then my face would have come up on Facebook and say, "Hey, if you want to come and transform your body, come down to my gym." They had that moment, and it felt like serendipity. Oh, I was thinking about this. One guy, he was looking for a to have a stomach surgery, which would have cost him 15, 20,000. He came in and he signed up for personal training because he saw my face on a reel. And he messaged me saying, "Come, I want to come in and And like that's what was happening a lot. People would have that moment. So I think that what you've got to look for is that you normally have the call to adventure, but then the impossible goal is like this feels seemingly impossible. I cannot do it A on my own, or B without a simple plan. And so the impossible goal is something that's so big it forces you to remove patterns, people, processes, procedures, partnerships, promises. It forces you to get rid of all of those P's. You know, we can go into more depth in that in a second, but it's like I remember when in my coaching life when clients would come into the arena and they were like, "I've got to earn 100 grand in 90 days," and when they had to do it, not a, and I think I love the way you talk about commitment. So you know, I think you should share on this, but there was a commitment that was just so different to a want. It was a must. You know, that's the difference. It was a must. I must do this. And yeah, and the people that came in with impossible goals, the second thing it did is that uh, the irony in body transformation is that the very thing that often motivates a lot of people is body fat. It's the very thing that they're losing along the way. And this is what happened in, and I think this happens in business as well, is that people are motivated to build a business that's successful because it gives them money, and then it solves their money problems, and then because they haven't got pain as a driver, they feel lackluster, they feel lost, they feel all sorts of things, and sometimes they, you know, that's why they sign up for coaching. But having an impossible goal is like a North Star. It keeps you going. And that was the difference between someone who had an impossible goal and someone who had just a short term transactional goal. So that was, you know, a lot of experience I had around impossible goals. What I'd ask you, Hina, is like, what did you notice? Like, what was the difference between people who've come into your world of impossible goals versus smaller transactional fixes?
Yeah, I completely agree with you, Ben. It requires a whole different identity for the person that has that goal. And then what we do when we work with an impossible goal or what feels like, and I guess for me, an impossible goal is one that you don't know how to do. You literally do not know how to do it. You maybe know what your first step might be, but you don't know how to do it. And that's where the growth comes in because a goal is about who you become. The goal is to grow, it's not to get. The getting is fun, but the goal is to grow. And that's why growth never stops. We are for fuller expression and expansion. We're always growing. And so when we reach that goal, which is so beautiful, we will then desire something else, something more that can be built on that. But a goal, an impossible goal for me is one that you don't know how to do. So that's when you know that you've got an impossible goal. And it scares you a little bit. It stretches you. I love what you said, Ben. And I wanted to go back to this because I haven't heard you speak about this. Call to adventure, the call to adventure. Can you just share more about that?
Yeah, I think we all got. So I'm a avid, massive nerd. We were talking Hin and I before the call. I'm super nerdy with coaching as well as tech and all that sort of stuff. But the hero's journey is something that I studied. I thought I even made it up. Right? Let me just tell you the real truth. Right? I was like, and
Okay.
I was like 25, and I was like, I've noticed this pattern transformation, and I'd noticed, and I talked to my team about it. Clients come in, they're in their struggle, and then they look for this, and then they find us a solution. They do the work, and they. I said, there's definitely like you know, a process. And then one day, someone said, "Have you ever heard about the hero's journey, Ben?" It's just like, little did I know is the whole psychology around the monomyth and Joseph Campbell. But there is a moment that we all have when we're going through a transformational process where we have the call to adventure. And it's we're in the ordinary world. Things feel the same, they feel mundane, they feel repetitive, they feel like a huge struggle. And then there's this moment where we hear the call to adventure. You know, often I even text Hina when I'm having a call to adventure. And it's often wise words get exchanged, Ben takes action. But it's like the call to adventure is a moment where your soul, it can be a moment of wisdom, something you see on a real inspiration. it happens, and you've got to take heed of that moment. And this is something I learned from you actually, is event action. You know, the time between hearing that call to adventure and you taking action on that is directly proportional to the likelihood that you're going to take any action at all. And I just think that so often in life we get these calls where we're being called to adventure and we don't heed the call, we resist it, we don't even listen, we're so distracted that we don't pay attention. And that's something that, especially as I've slowed down in my 30s, I've been better at hearing those calls. And sometimes the thing is it's going to be a lot of discomfort. It's going to be disruption, um, and that's often what it looks like. But there's also a very well known part of that, which is called the refusal of the call. And it's this part where we get called to adventure to go and do something different, sell our current business and go and do something different, burn down our programs, change partner. It can be anything, but we don't listen. We keep refusing and we learn the same lesson over and over again. And that's where we see the person in that transformation just feeling so trapped. And so, yeah, it's a very well documented part of a transformational process.
I know people are listening to this and they're like, "Oh my gosh, I can relate to that." I think we all can when we haven't, listened to the call or we haven't taken action. And then you're right, it certain things keep repeating itself or it gets louder and louder until we can't really refuse it anymore or we've got to deal with it. We've got to really deal
I think Hina's been my call to adventure. I remember you
Really?
voice noting me. Yeah, you voice noting me about coming to Arizona, and
Yeah.
it sat with me. It sat with me. So, and I was like, oh, I gave Hina loads of excuses about why I couldn't come. And anyway, we got back into conversation. You're like, listen, this is here's your call to adventure. Refusal of the call happened. I was like, Hina, no, I'm not coming to Arizona. It just doesn't make any sense. And then I ended up flying to Arizona, meeting Hina in person, the community there that I ended up working with. And the biggest part though is that sometimes that you're in that moment, and do you know what I've found, Hannah, as well, is that sometimes it's just nice to know that you're in that part. When someone says, "Oh yeah, you're in the refusal of the
Yeah.
call," oh, you're in that, and it's like, oh yeah, I'm meant to feel like this. This is how I'm meant to feel because I'm in this part of my journey, and it's given me tremendous acceptance. Whenever I've been in a part of this of my transformational journey, I'm like, I'm in struggle. I'm meant to feel like this. Ah, okay, okay. Acceptance, and you move forward. So that's yeah. This I'm actually probably there right now. That's where I'm at right now.
Yeah, I know, because I left you a voice note saying, "You know what? You know the decision."
Yeah.
It's like, don't tell me you're an indecision. It's so true though, this part about being able to label it, give it language, and to understand where you are at makes all the difference. I remember Bob Proctor, my close mentor, we would ask him like, "Bob, do you still get nervous about things or hit what we would call the terror barrier?" And he said he would because he's always growing, but it's so short. It's like a second, like and really what it is, it's an indicator that he's in the moving in the right direction. It's not an indicator to retreat because he knows what it is. It's like, "Oh, yeah, that's it. That's what happens at this part." Now, there are gonna be people that have impossible goals or they've set impossible goals, and then they start to hit some obstacles. Can we talk a little bit about that, Ben? What have you seen and what do you suggest during that time? Because it can feel like a lot is going wrong.
Yeah, it's sometimes the pathway that shows itself doesn't seem like it's the right pathway. That's one of the things that I was like, is this really the right pathway? Um, I think the biggest obstacle that I feel people have is pain. Like one of the biggest ones is that I learned this from Phil Stutz. Like I'm a massive, massive follower of Phil Stutz, and he said something that really changed my life. Is that when we learn to turn towards our pain, our life transforms. And pain, not in the kind of sadomasochistic way, of physical pain, is emotional pain, the discomfort. And the thing that we're often avoiding in terms of pain is the very thing we need to run towards. Whereas a sales call, rejection, whether it's a hard conversation, whether it's a sit down with a partner and really sharing how you feel, whether it's a leaving a relationship, whether it's starting a new one, or whether it's deciding to have children, whatever it is, it's facing a pain of yours. And what we do is we run from that pain, and that's the first obstacle. We choose in the moment to avoid that pain, but it becomes a longer term obstacle. And that was so revolutionary for me. I was like, oh my gosh, like that really was, so many of my problems in my 20s were
Yeah.
founded in that. That's just
Yeah, and numbing it and all the ways to run from it, to not feel, yeah.
I worked. I was a workaholic. I worked not to feel. I worked that out in therapy. I was working hard not to feel. And the thing that really has changed my thinking, and especially in my 30s, is that the size of the obstacle is directly proportional to the size of the goal. So if you are somebody who has a huge force for growth, so Hina, I know you've got a huge force for growth, you are going to be met by equally internally huge obstacles. And it's the ability to arm yourself with tools to overcome those obstacles. And I like the way that this was explained to me. It was with spiritual physics. I think it's Newton's third law. Every force has an equal and opposing force. But if you think about it, if you're someone who is meant for huge growth and transformation and impact and all those things, you're going to be met with so many destructive forces, self-doubt, internal dialogue. It can be self-sabotage, whatever you want to call it. Part X. There's loads of ways that we label it. I don't think I'm attached to any of them, but it's just resistance. And I think what you've got to be able to do is spot how you present those obstacles internally. Because I was thinking about this the other day. There's not many people that talk about this. Most of the things I've noticed in coaching, people come thinking they've got external obstacles. They haven't. They've got internal. And that's the beauty of coaching, is that I don't need to be a subject matter expert in somebody's business, because they know how to deal with their external obstacles, but it's often the internal ones that they're coming into coaching to help overcome. So I don't. Maybe you can verify this or challenge this, but I don't think I've ever had a coaching conversation where someone's coming to me saying that there's an external obstacle, that it hasn't been an actual internal one, a commitment, some doubt. I don't think there's ever been one. They've come to me and said, "Ben, it's a cash flow issue, or it's a market issue, or it's always been an internal obstacle." I think, and I don't think I'm wrong with this. Maybe you've got some experience on that as well, Hina, you could share.
I agree. I mean, I think that it's internal obstacles because it's the way that the world is occurring to us, the way our world is occurring to us, and we think that that is the world. So we think it's an external obstacle, but it's the way that the external is occurring to us. And the good news is, well, then we're the ones that can solve that. We're the ones that have the solution. Then the solution, if the problem is inside of us, the solution is inside of us as well. And it can be, we've been conditioned to think that everything is external, and we've been conditioned to feel like it's the economy, it's this or it's that. But I remember someone actually said this on one of my calls. I don't know who the quote is from, but it's like, "You are the sky, the rest is the weather."
Mm.
And it's really remaining the sky, it's remaining the essential, and we talk a lot about that in my programs, about being the essential and the incidental.
Yeah.
Now, that is not to say that things aren't happening. Life is going to life. There are going to be things that happen, but you don't want to create from that. You still want to create from your goal, from what you desire, which is why it's important to know what is that goal, and then think of the identity of the person with that goal. And then how would that person view this obstacle? So, for example, even today on my morning call, one of my clients is having a lot of, she's moving money around a lot, but she's acquiring a business. This is actually a normal and natural state in acquiring a business. There's money that is going to legal fees, there's money to go to banking, accountants, all of that. Very, very normal. It feels really uncomfortable.
Mm.
But if we look at it from the place of her goal, this is not an obstacle. This is actually just a natural order of things in the way it is meant to unfold for her to acquire this business. But we can make it wrong. We can make things wrong or off when they're not. I think, and that's what happens with the obstacles. And I think you're right. It's like yeah, I had another client this morning. She's really putting herself out there. So of course, everything is going to come up to try to keep her where she is and be like, no, don't do this. What will people think? And do you really want to be that vulnerable? So I think that, especially as powerful leaders, you've got to be able to make powerful requests and be able to be powerful in uncertainty.
Yeah, I like what you said there. Actually, the things that come up, like this is what I believe is that if there was a this force, like say we've got this force for growth, and we've got this force to keep us the same and safe, that force is going to leverage the biggest, the most highly influential part of you, which is your state. So, for example, if she's putting herself out there, the part of her that wants her to stay safe, stay unseen, stay hidden, might leverage something like hopelessness, which is like when you take one shot, you put up a video and nobody likes it, no one engages. And the way I've always liked this to be explained is that you create things as knockouts versus knockbacks. And this really helped me. It's like, oh my god, this is just a knockback. And so a knockout is where you take a shot, it doesn't pan out, and you tell yourself, oh, that's the reason this isn't going to work. It's that shot. You've just created a knockout from a knockback. And as soon as you start to notice these little parts, these little ways that your resistance shows up, that's when I feel that you can start to label it and move forwards as well. So that's yeah.
So, Ben, let's talk a little bit then about implementation. So, you've got this big goal, you're aware that there's obstacles happening, and then there's some transformation that is occurring. So, transformation and implementation at this stage, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so recently, I think I learned a lot of this from Ben. Like Ben Hardy has been is actually Hina that introduced me to Ben's work. It was actually when I was working with Hina, and you said you sent me a book actually, and I was like, I read it, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is my life's work. This is what I've been doing. This is exactly what I've been doing, and I like this thinking, especially with transformation. I always looked at transformation as what you're going to do in the future, like create in the future. But over the last, say, 12 months in my life, I've got way more value and way more momentum from removing the past, from aggressive. And I think the word here is aggressively removing the past. Aggressively, and not in a violent way. You hear the word aggression, you often think violence. It's like, but no, but being really pushy into the what I really want, what I really don't want in my life. And I just started looking at like, where am I really having to, where am I hanging on to my past? Where am I hanging on to things that don't serve me anymore, but I've told myself a story that they can fit in my future. So I think for transformation, we could go way into different parts of this, but for the sake of, effectiveness, look at your past. Like, what are you trying to sell into your future from your past? And what stories are you still telling that just don't serve you anymore? What are the promises you keep making to people that don't work anymore? And that,
Can you give us an example, Ben? Like an example that you used in your life when what did you drop from your past?
oh, amazing, great question. So the biggest one was the gym. So last year I sold I sold the gym, but I only sold 50%. And then I sold
Mhm.
the remaining 50% when I realized I didn't want that as part of my future. And that was like, I was
Wow.
hanging on to that as like a for safety blanket. And I was like, actually, do you know what? I had mental bandwidth going to the gym, even though I wasn't operational in the gym. I still owned part of the gym. I still thought about the P&L. I still thought about the cash flow. I still thought about where we were gonna get the next sale. That was still going on, and I didn't realize it until I actually slowed down and audited, like, actually, intentionally audited what did I wanna get rid of? What were the things I wanted to get rid of? And I got rid of that, and I got rid of a load of other things. Another thing were some of my relationships with friends, which I was propping those relationships up. I was the one who always contacted those people, and I just lovingly decided that I still love this person. I'm stopping with this continuous communication. And if they got back in touch with me, it would be fine. But it was just like there was so many things I was hanging on to, and I just let go of them, and that was so helpful.
Yeah, as you're talking, it makes me think about how growth is truly about subtracting rather than adding.
Yeah,
It
yeah.
it is the subtracting, it is the letting go, and that would have to do with your identity as well, as part of your identity for so long was being a gym owner of this bricks and mortar gym business.
Yeah, I actually remember a year into being a fully online business owner, I still behaved like a bricks and mortar gym owner. I still went into my office every day. I
Yeah.
sat there, went to the same office every day. I never went to a coffee shop. It's just like I still did the same things. Like I was like, I can be somewhere else, and I moved to Dubai. It's it's like
Yeah.
it was really funny. I was like, I remember saying to my business partner at the time, I was like, we don't need to do this here. We can go anywhere in the world. And he was like, yeah, okay, we can do that. So it's funny how you can outgrow the gym, but the mindset still has to change. So yeah, that was an interesting one. And
I
go on,
yeah.
go on, Hina.
Well, I was gonna say, I think what's coming up for me is when I decided to fully let go of psychotherapy as well.
Yeah, I was gonna say,
It
that must have been huge.
Yeah, and it felt really, really scary, but what I've realized, Ben, is the scary part is the indecision, because then you're just reenacting it going back and forth and back and forth. It's actually not scary once you make a decision, because once you make the decision, now you know what the next step is, what your immediate next step is. You've got a little bit of direction. Looking back, it was the indecision that was the most scary
100%.
in that whole situation.
Yeah, it always is. Actually, that's so profound what you've just said. I just want to take that in because that is so much of what I saw and I've seen is that somebody would talk about getting fit or transforming the business or raising their bottom line or 10x in their business. And the thought, as soon as they'd made the commitment, the amount of bandwidth that they would get back, the amount of focus that it would get, was night and day. Like 2 weeks into any transformation, someone would often say to me, I'm so glad I've done this. Like, I'm so glad I'm doing this. Like, I've seen clients make annual investments in my coaching and make it back in the first 2 weeks because it was just like, oh, I didn't realize this would what was going to happen. I was like, yeah, well, I did tell you so. I love it when that happens. Like, I think you can get this back in about 30 days, and they're like, "You sure?" I'm like, "Yeah, you really can." And I've seen it happen in your programs as well. So it's like, it's it's something that's really interesting that happens, and this is something that I'm believing more and more that when you find the right transformational path, it happens fast. It does. Change happens fast. I'm not saying that it happens overnight, but change will happen fast when it's the right change. Um, And that's something that's really interesting, when you really find the right levers to pull, it does happen fast. I think that's something that I've really believe in my to my I believe that if you go and work with the right person and you're doing the right things, change happens fast and it can be permanent.
Absolutely, absolutely, and that brings us to implementation then too, and you talked in the beginning about pulling small levers that make big changes or have a big impact. Can you share about that and bring implementation into that?
Yeah, so what a lot of people will come into I like using diet as a great example because everyone can get the diet thing. We've all been on diets. We've all got stories about diets. I was always the how can I give this person the least things to think about and do that's going to have the biggest effect? And how can I make it so seemingly so simple that that person can give me a 10 out of 10 score that they can do it? So the way this would happen is that someone will walk in and I would just say to them, all I want you to do is just focus on eating 100 grams of protein. And it sounded sound like there was a couple of things in there. They had never done that before. It seemed way more simple. They were like, "Oh, I can do that." It stretched them a little bit. Was it the exact right step? That there are other steps that can be just as good. But I just said that, like, it was yep, you've joined fast. Oh, you're being told to eat protein. It was the narrative, and it was a big lever for people. And
Mhm.
they got rapid transformations because they had something that they could do. And so what I think I've always been good at doing and very effective at doing is helping people find that lever, like how and early on as well. It's like, okay, actually for you, it's just, connect with 100 clients. It could be you need to go out and start marketing, start advertising. You need to go and find a mentor or a partnership. You're looking for the most effectively lever first, and I think what happens is when you find that lever, makes everything else feel like it's going downhill. Like the effort is downhill. It gets easier instead of it's an uphill battle.
Right.
Um, and that for me is always my challenge as a coach. Where can I find the most effective lever as fast as possible? And yeah, maybe might come in the first week. Maybe it might first 6 weeks or 6 months. But when you see a client find that lever, that's when magical things happen, like magical things happen. I actually got a story from one of Hina's containers is that I actually even got one of the clients to go and sit down with a competitor. But I don't know if you I was like, go and sit with your competitor, maybe meet them for and she's like, what the heck are what are you asking me to do? I was like, I can't remember exactly why we got onto it, but it was a lever point, and I think she got some business from it, or there was a relationship that was formed, and what you can do is that collapses time. When you have those levers, they're effective. It rockets your momentum, absolutely rockets. And then into the implementation side, I think that I come from a background of I would have been on the person who probably got the ADHD diagnosis in school,
Mhm.
but I was just so committed to learning. I found a way to implement and learn and focus, and I think that what I started to build is just a really good schedule and what I call structural discipline. And I think that when you're implementing, um, I think there's three disciplines that we have to be mindful of, and I think it's worth writing these down because I think they're all worth working on. There's reactive discipline, structural discipline, and expansive discipline. And I'd never heard it broken down until like last week.
So I'm writing this down
Yeah,
too
yeah.
because I take
Yeah, yeah.
so reactive discipline,
The first discipline is well, it's probably structural is the first one. It's the ability,
the structure.
yeah, to operationalize our goal. So for example, if you've got an impossible goal, yeah, for sure, it's a great idea to have an impossible goal, but then you've got to get straight into building a structure that supports that. Your life becomes a structure that creates that goal off on your calendar. But then you've also got to manage your emotions, which is a reactive discipline. Those thoughts, those obstacles that come up that we talked about before. And so that is so beautiful. It's like, okay, well, I've got the structure, but then I need to manage the emotions, which are inevitably going to come up as um, those days where you just don't want to do what you've got to do, but you still do it.
Mhm.
And then the final one, and this is where I had to really work on this, which was expansive discipline. It's the ability to see the bigger picture and step into it. It's the ability to have a really, really big vision and take steps towards it, even when things seemingly aren't going well. I know our good friend Yassine's really good at this. Like he's just such a big thinker. I can remember spending so much time with Yassine, and I actually hit so many terror barriers when I was with him because he would just be like, "Yeah, we'll buy this park and we'll do this thing and we'll this time." And I was like, I remember my bodily reaction, my expansive discipline was so terrible, was so terrible. It's fantastic now. I'm thinking way bigger. And it's that ability, and do you know what I think, Hannah, is the ability to intentionally do this. And I know you do this on your morning calls. And I remember coming on your morning call when it's and maybe makes always makes me laugh. And you're telling me about looking around houses, and there was one house with a big garden, and then you were like, "How am I going to mow the lawn?" And it's just like, and I just like this image of you trying to mow a lawn. I was like, "Would Paul be doing that anyway?" But it's like equally. Do you remember telling that story?
Yeah, it was so wild. It was like, we were looking, just at, like, mansions, y multi-million dollar homes, and it's interesting where you hit your edge. So, I could go with this to a certain point, but then the lawn, because apparently I can see myself in a multi-million dollar mansion, but I don't have people to take care of the
No,
landscaping.
it made me
I
laugh.
am on the lawnmower.
It was, do you know what? It made me
Doing
laugh because it was exactly what I was doing in my life. I had these big visions, but like, but how could I do this from, and there's so many limitations I was putting on my future. And you just, the way you told that story, it was funny. Imagine you trying to operate a, a lawnmower. So there's the second thing, no judgment. I just thought that was, I might have fallen into Paul's remit, but the thing is that the expansive discipline is the ability to take that uncomfortable choice and move forwards into towards pain. And that's the final one. So kind of implementation is that ability to manage those three disciplines, I think. It's like taking action, like building structures, breaking structures that don't serve you, and rebuilding them. Because I think that's what happens a lot is that people build a structure, they think it's going to be forever, and they hold on to it for too long. And that's where expansive discipline comes in. So it helps you break that structure down. So that was incredibly helpful for me. I was like, I thought I've got a saying I use quite a lot, which is things work until they don't. It was, and I think you said, I think we talked about things work in our businesses until they don't. I think as a high performer, what you've got to be able to do is make and break structures very, very effectively.
Yeah. Yes, and that's the part of not being attached. And I think sometimes we hold on to things for way too long beyond their expiry date because of an attachment or a history to it, or because we feel like, but I put so much work or effort into it, and we think it would be a waste if we let it go. But I think if you can build this muscle of being able to do exactly what you said, you're gonna get further faster because you're also gonna take the learnings from it, so you realize that nothing is ever a waste. You learned something from it that will help you in the new model that you're creating or the way that you're creating it. And, as I look at this reactive, structural, expansive, what I love is I can see how it's this web. I can see how it's all intertwined and how one can support the other because if I have expansive discipline and I'm thinking of my impossible goal through that lens, through that way of being, then that can inform my reactions. And so then if I have a reaction to something that I would, looking back go, "Oh, I would prefer not to have it." I can look at my expansive vision and think, "Okay, is that reaction a match to somebody with that vision?"
Mm,
And then structurally too, do I have the calendar? Do I have the operations in place, like operationalized this to support me to have the reactions that I want, like you were talking about mood and emotions, and to support somebody that is living at that expansive level. I just love
that's
this.
good. So
There.
good. Is
Ah,
very,
totally
very
take
helpful.
it.
Very helpful. And that's,
Everybody take it. Just credit Ben Owen
yeah.
with this. This is so awesome. I can't leave this. I have more to say about this. Hang on. Okay. Because I just think that, sometimes we don't feel like doing something. But if we are connected to that, if we have that expansive discipline and are connected to that impossible goal, and we create, and then we match our identity to it, our identity trumps feelings. So I may not feel like running, but if I identify as somebody who is going to take part in a marathon in a few weeks, then even if I don't feel like doing it, I'm doing it because of my identity and my commitment. So that's how I think, that's where I think in the reactive discipline about how we feel, we're being and then obviously having a structure that supports me, that's in harmony with that expansive vision. Okay, I'm gonna be sitting with this after the podcast. Still thinking about this. I
It
love it.
worked.
I love
I
it.
think it was because people talk about being disciplined all the time, and I think that it's so. I think it can be quite shaming for some people. It's like, "Oh, I'm not disciplined." I'm like, "No, you are. You're actually really good at managing your emotions, or you're a big thinker." But I'm not disciplined. It's just structure we need to work on. And actually, in coaching, it's helped me with a lot of clients. Like I've got clients that have really, really big thoughts, but the structure that they bring to those thoughts is what they need to work on. So, um, implementation for me is that process. It's a bit of the ability to do that, be disciplined, create discipline. It's not something you have. It's not like a character trait. It's something you build. It's like you don't. There's not a gene. Uh, so I definitely wasn't. Or I probably was more disciplined than I probably give myself credit for. But I've become exceptionally disciplined over the last, say, 10, 15 years. Especially on my calendar, especially with kids. You talked about, having kids is probably the best thing that I had to be way more disciplined with my calendar when I had children, and a team. So I think I'd like to like share a little bit on support. I think there's something I've
Yes.
noticed in like I've worked alongside Hina in her in her containers, and I've never witnessed support like I saw in the inner circle and the the retreats I've been on, the support of your community. I just want to speak to the I've been in communities and I've led communities and I've been part of them since I was 18, like even my running days. But the way that the women showed up for one another in those groups was just phenomenal. I watched things happen, miracles happen when
Yeah.
people were supporting each other. And I think that when you're selecting a community, you need to try and find a community where the normal or the default action is the behavior that you're trying to promote in yourself. So, for example, if you're listening to this podcast and you're looking to be around women who talk about money, talk about success, talk about breaking through, talk about winning, talk about celebration, in his community, I can advocate for that. I saw inside the because I live that. Like, coaching happens behind a curtain. That's the funniest thing about the coaching industry. It happens behind a curtain, and you listen to these podcasts and you hear these things. But I was lucky to watch that happen, and I can definitely advocate for your community because it was so amazing to watch women be so felt like had such big obstacles in their lives from support to sometimes financial, could be a thought like business problems and challenges, and watching people show up for them and challenge them and bring them on. And that was just amazing because the default behavior was that. And that's what you need to be looking for. Whether you're looking to transform your body or to build your business, go and find a community where that is just the default behavior, and you're off to a massive start. That's what my belief about communities. And the second part is like more of a self-based thing, is treat yourself like a pro. I come from elite sport. My first rodeo in coaching was in elite sport, and I really did take a lot from that. An elite sports person would have a coach, a psychotherapist, or a counselor. They'd have a physio, they'd have a massage therapist, they'd have a nutritionist, and they would treat themselves like a proper athlete. And some of these athletes didn't have a lot of money, but they would still have all of these people. Yet you've got these
Mhm.
business owners who talk about high performance and they barely drink enough water. So it's like, and I think what you've got to do is, as a high performing business owner, is start to think like a pro athlete and say, well, who's in my corner? Have I got my coach? Have I got my community? Have I got my physiotherapist, psychotherapist, shaman, whoever it is for you? And start to create that. And I think that's something, if you're listening to this podcast and you're a woman performing at a higher level, start to really think about like who can I add to my and that can be an addition, not a subtraction. Who can I add to my coaching staff who actually work on me? And when you start to think like that, I think that's when you start to unlock levels of personal potential that were not even on your radar. Like that is something that I would definitely advocate for because I saw especially when I was working with the inner circle with Hina, there was ladies in there, and they were accessing all sorts of different coaching and support and therapies, and even the community, that they had it all, and that's why they moved forward so fast.
It's so true. It makes me think of my month away every August to work with my coach, Steve Hardison. And I remember the first time that I was making the decision to do that, that I made the decision. The boys were in camp. So it was the perfect time to go. But it was very unsettling. It was very different for me. A month off of the business, a month not being client facing, a month for me, and pouring into myself like that made such a big difference. My clients were so excited for September, not because they missed me, maybe they missed me a little bit, but it was more about who is she gonna be? Like, how is she showing up after a month of her working on her? Because I'm great, I'm really good at in the regular times, let alone after I've poured into me. And the other piece that I noticed, Ben, was that I had a lot of judgment on myself the first time I did it. My clients were so happy for me.
Mm.
They were like, "Yes, go, and thank you for showing us a model of this, of where you can take a month off of your business." And it actually gave them permission, unconscious permission, to do the same. So this piece about getting support, sometimes we feel that the getting support is a weakness because we should be able to do it all. I think especially as women, we are programmed that we should be able to do it all, and so much may fall on us. And when you allow yourself to be supported, and sometimes it's in your personal life, that's where you need the most support. It could be a dog walker, can make a huge difference. I had a client, Ben, you're gonna love this. This was huge for her. She has little ones and, they're going to school, and she has a nanny to help her. She generally works from home unless she's going in to work with other people, and out of guilt, she would go to pick up the kids with the nanny, as opposed to just letting the nanny go and pick up the kids, which is one of the functions of having that nanny. But she was feeling guilty and like, "Oh, I should," and that's this pressure that we put on ourselves that we should be doing it all. Well, she's dropped that, and that time that she's kind of gotten back from that has been huge. And the beautiful thing is that it allows her to be present with the kids because she gets to wrap up her day, and then she can fully be present with the kids. So I think the support piece is huge, and I think you wanna look at many, many areas in your life where you can invite support. The other reason I think it's big is that it enlarges your capacity to receive. And if you wanna receive more in your business, in your personal life, you've gotta have capacity to receive it. And having support is one of those ways that you can do that. And creating this also then creates an internal safety for more money, success, and visibility, I believe. So I love this, Ben. Any final thoughts, Ben, on this conversation? Anything you want to share?
Actually, I'll share a quote from Sean Acor's book, which was it's called The Happiness Advantage. And he shared about success for people at Harvard. So um, people in Harvard, the main determinant of their long-term success is down to one thing, which is the depth and the breadth of their social support network. And that was for me was like, when it comes to talk about support, that really brought it home, is that if you wanted to look at the people that would do well over 3 years in a transformative process, it's the people that had access to lots of people and deep connections. And then we go and think we can do it all on our own. And that's why support's so important. And so you can't talk about transformation without talking about support. It doesn't happen in a vacuum. It doesn't happen on your own. And I'm so grateful to be part of, I'm grateful to be part of the supportive environment you've created. I've created them myself in the past, and I think that if you're listening to this, one of the things I really urge you to think about is like, what are you doing for your own support network, and how you're supporting yourself. So, thank you, Hannah. I've really enjoyed this. I love our conversations, and I'm really grateful to you. It's almost like you're the person that shows up and gives me the simple plan, or that this is I'm at the precipice of my um, pathways. You just seem to be there, and I love how you do that for me, and I love you, and I'm so grateful for you. So thank you so much.
Oh, Ben, right back at you. I've just loved this conversation and I could go for another few hours. It's always a delight to speak to you. And I love this quote about you can't have transformation without support.
Mm,
That is worth putting. I've got to tattoo that. That is so good. And I love it because it gives us permission to have support then.
mm.
Go and get the support that you need. Ben, thanks again. Thank you so much. I appreciate you.
Appreciate you too. Thank you so much.
Thank you for listening. I always feel so inspired when I speak to Ben. And if you do, please share this podcast with anybody that you think would benefit from hearing it. And remember to download, save, rate, review, do all the things. And I will see you here next time on Possibilities.